April 8, 1943. 27,000 feet above Rouen, France. Oberleutnant Ralph Hermican couldn't suppress his laughter. Through the crystal-clear canopy of his Focke-Wulf 190, the veteran ace of Jagdgeschwader 26 watched ungainly silhouettes climbing laboriously toward his formation. The American fighters making their combat debut over occupied Europe looked like nothing he'd ever seen. "The Americans have sent us flying milk bottles," he transmitted to his wingman. Below them, 16 P-47C Thunderbolts of the 4th Fighter Group lumbered upward. Barrel-shaped fuselages topped with greenhouse canopies, wings that seemed too small for their massive bodies, propellers that dwarfed anything in the Luftwaffe inventory. To German pilots accustomed to sleek Spitfires and nimble Soviet fighters, these corpulent American machines appeared almost comical. What Hermican didn't know, what none of the German pilots circling like wolves above could have imagined, was that they were witnessing the arrival of the weapon that would systematically destroy the Luftwaffe's fighter arm. Within 18 months, these flying milk bottles would transform from objects of derision into instruments of terror. This is the story of how industrial logic defeated tactical brilliance, how American brute force engineering buried German elegance under an avalanche of steel and lead, and how the sound of 8 synchronized Browning machine guns became the last thing 28,000 Luftwaffe pilots ever heard. The P-47 Thunderbolt emerged from panic in June 1940 as German fighters swept across France. Alexander Kartveli, Republic Aviation's Georgian-born chief designer, received urgent specifications from the U.S. Army Air Force. They wanted a high-altitude interceptor capable of matching the Luftwaffe's best. What Kartveli designed instead was a monster. "It will be a dinosaur," he admitted to his design team. "But it will be a dinosaur with good proportions." The prototype that first flew on May 6, 1941, shocked everyone who saw it. At nearly 10,000 pounds empty, it weighed 65% more than its predecessor. Test pilots approaching it for the first time invariably ask the same question: "This thing actually flies?" Not only did it fly, it flew like nothing else at altitude. The Pratt & Whitney R2800 double Wasp engine, an 18-cylinder radial producing 2,000 horsepower, could maintain full power at 27,000 feet, where German fighters gasped for air. The turbo supercharger delivered sea-level performance in the stratosphere. But mastering this beast came at a terrible cost. Major Hubert "Hub" Zemke's 56th Fighter Group lost 18 pilots and 41 aircraft in training accidents between September 1942 and January 1943. The P-47 killed more Americans in training than Germans would in the first months of combat. Those who survived discovered something extraordinary. Lieutenant Robert Johnson, a farm boy from Oklahoma who would become one of America's top aces, described his first flight. "It was like strapping yourself to a locomotive. The power was unbelievable. You didn't fly it, you aimed it." The first combat encounters confirmed every German prejudice. The P-47s couldn't turn with Focke-Wulfs, couldn't climb with Messerschmitts, couldn't match their nimble handling. Hauptmann Josef "Pips" Priller, commanding officer of JG-26, reported to headquarters, "The new American fighter is meat for the slaughter. It flies like a truck, turns like a freight train, and climbs like a pregnant cow." In their first month, American groups lost 14 Thunderbolts for only 3 German kills. British pilots joked that the best evasive maneuver in a P-47 was to unstrap and run around the roomy cockpit. But something strange was happening that German intelligence failed to notice. The P-47s that were shot down had absorbed incredible punishment before falling. One aircraft returned with 21 cannon holes and over 100 machine gun strikes, damage that would have disintegrated a Messerschmitt or Spitfire. The massive radial engine, lacking vulnerable coolant systems, shrugged off hits that would have stopped a liquid-cooled fighter cold. And when P-47s did get their guns on target, the results were catastrophic. The event that changed everything occurred on June 26, 1943, over the English Channel. Second Lieutenant Robert Johnson was returning from escort duty when his formation was bounced by 16 Focke-Wulf 190s. In the first seconds of combat, his Thunderbolt took catastrophic damage. 21 20mm cannon shells exploded across the aircraft. The canopy shattered. Hydraulic fluid sprayed into the cockpit. Fire erupted behind the instrument panel. Johnson tried to bail out, but discovered a shell had welded the canopy shut. He was trapped in a dying aircraft at 27,000 feet. Then it got worse. A lone Focke-Wulf discovered the crippled Thunderbolt limping toward England at barely 170 miles per hour. What followed became one of the most extraordinary encounters in aerial warfare history. The German pilot positioned himself behind Johnson and opened fire with his 4 20mm cannon and 2 13mm machine guns. Johnson could only huddle behind his armor plate and pray. The Thunderbolt absorbed the entire cannon ammunition load. The German repositioned and fired again. Still, it flew. He pulled alongside, emptied his remaining machine gun ammunition into the wreck. Still, it flew. Johnson could see the German pilot's face clearly. Young, blond, his expression shifting from confidence to confusion to something approaching fear. The German shook his head in apparent amazement, gave an informal salute, and peeled away. Johnson's P-47 landed at Manston with its engine failing on the runway. The crew chief stopped counting bullet holes after reaching 200. 3 of the 4 main structural longerons were shot through, yet the aircraft had brought him home. German intelligence initially refused to believe it. No aircraft could absorb that much punishment. But testimony from multiple pilots confirmed the impossible. The Thunderbolt had taken everything the Luftwaffe's best fighter could deliver and survived. By summer's end, American pilots had learned to exploit the P-47's true strengths. Lieutenant Colonel Zemke discovered the secret through brutal trial and error. Don't turn with them. Don't climb with them at low altitude. Use your weight. Use your power. Use your guns. The Thunderbolt's massive weight became a weapon. From 30,000 feet, a P-47 could reach 550 miles per hour, faster than any German fighter could achieve, even in a vertical dive. This speed could be converted to altitude in a zoom climb that left pursuing fighters helplessly behind. And then came the guns, 8 50 caliber Browning machine guns, 3,400 rounds of ammunition, a combined rate of fire of 6,000 rounds per minute, enough concentrated firepower to saw a Messerschmitt in half in less than 2 seconds. At convergence distance, all 8 guns' paths intersected in a zone roughly 6 feet in diameter. Anything in that zone faced 100 half-inch projectiles per second, each traveling at 2,900 feet per second. The ammunition itself was a revelation of American industrial capacity. While German fighters struggled with limited cannon ammunition, typically 120 to 200 rounds, American pilots could maintain sustained fire for over 30 seconds. The standard combat load mixed armor-piercing incendiary rounds with tracers in patterns designed to both destroy and ignite. Lieutenant Colonel Francis Gabby Gabreski, who would become the top American ace in Europe, described the effect. When you hit them with all 8, they don't just go down, they explode. I saw a 109 literally cut in half, the tail falling one way, the nose and wings another. The pilot never knew what hit him. German pilots who survived described it as facing a wall of lead. They called the sound Roosevelt's piano. Once you heard it, you never forgot it. Many heard it for the last time. By October 1943, the Luftwaffe was discovering another horrifying reality. At high altitude, German fighters saw their performance degrade while the Thunderbolt only grew stronger. Oberleutnant Hans Philipp, one of Germany's most successful aces with 206 victories, encountered this fatally on October 8th. His Focke-Wulf was sluggish at 28,000 feet, gasping for oxygen. When P-47s dove from 32,000 feet, his formation was helpless. Robert Johnson himself was among the attackers. His combat report was clinical. Opened fire at 300 yards. Observed strikes along entire fuselage. Enemy aircraft exploded. No parachute observed. Philipp's death sent shock waves through the Luftwaffe. If one of their best, a man who had survived over 500 combat missions on both eastern and western fronts, couldn't survive against the Thunderbolts, what chance did average pilots have? The German High Command ordered an immediate investigation. The report delivered to Reichsmarschall Hermann Göring in November 1943 was sobering. The Thunderbolt's service ceiling exceeded 42,000 feet, higher than any German fighter could reach. Its dive speed approached the sound barrier. Its armor included 3/8-inch steel plate behind the pilot and 1/2-inch bulletproof glass. Most disturbingly, its rugged construction allowed it to absorb damage that would destroy 3 conventional fighters and still return home. In January 1944, a new variant arrived that completed the transformation. The P-47D-22 featured paddle blade propellers 13 feet in diameter that bit into the air like massive oars. Climb rate improved dramatically. Where earlier Thunderbolts had climbed at an anemic 2,200 feet per minute, the new variants achieved 3,000 feet per minute. The massive propeller also changed the sound. The distinctive thundering roar, blade tips reaching supersonic speeds, could be heard from miles away. German ground troops called it Donnerschlag, thunderclap. Hauptmann Heinrich Knocker of JG-11 wrote in his combat diary, "The fat American fighters have learned to climb. They followed us up to 30,000 feet. Schmidt was caught and blown apart. Nothing left but smoke and fragments. These are not the same machines we laughed at last year." On D-Day, the Luftwaffe discovered how completely the balance had shifted. Over 500 P-47s created an impenetrable umbrella over the beaches. Oberleutnant Wolfgang Fischer, one of only 3 German pilots to reach the landing zones, reported, "The sky belonged to the Americans. Thunderbolts were stacked from sea level to 30,000 feet. 12 fighters from our group attempted to break through at dawn. I was the only one to return. The Thunderbolt's ground attack capability proved equally devastating. Each aircraft could carry 2 1,000-pound bombs and 10 5-inch rockets. Oberst Hans von Luck, commanding the 125th Panzer Grenadier Regiment in Normandy, experienced it firsthand. They came in so low you could see the pilots' faces. The sound was terrifying. Engines roaring, rockets screaming, then the hammer of those heavy machine guns. A column of our trucks simply ceased to exist. 20 vehicles transformed into burning wreckage in one pass. In June 1944 alone, 9th Air Force Thunderbolts destroyed 651 locomotives, 3,147 trucks, 512 tanks, and 68,000 motor vehicles. The Wehrmacht was forced to move only at night. Behind the combat statistics lay the real story of Germany's defeat, American industrial might. Republic Aviation produced 15,683 P-47s during the war. At peak production, the Farmingdale factory completed one Thunderbolt every hour. Each aircraft required 65,000 individual parts, 8 miles of electrical wiring, and 2,000 pounds of aluminum. Yet American workers assembled them with precision that exceeded peacetime standards. Even more impressive than aircraft production was pilot training. By 1944, the United States was graduating 30,000 pilots annually, more than Germany had trained in the entire war. Each P-47 pilot received a minimum of 400 hours of flight training before entering combat. German pilots, by contrast, were entering combat with less than 100 hours by war's end. By May 1945, the average German fighter pilot had less than 30 hours of combat experience. The average P-47 pilot had over 200. On January 1, 1945, the Luftwaffe launched Operation Bodenplatte, nearly 900 fighters attacking Allied airfields. At one base, Germans destroyed 22 Thunderbolts on the ground. A captured pilot taunted, "What do you think of that?" Major George Brooking pointed to the flight line where crews were already clearing wreckage. "By tomorrow, we'll have 40 new ones. How long will it take you to replace your pilots?" The German smirk disappeared. Within 48 hours, factory-fresh P-47s filled the line. The Luftwaffe lost 271 aircraft and 213 pilots in Bodenplatte, losses they could never replace. The final statistics defy comprehension. In Europe, 3,752 German aircraft destroyed in aerial combat, 86,000 railway cars destroyed, 9,000 locomotives, 68,000 trucks. In the Pacific, 697 Japanese aircraft destroyed. The Thunderbolt achieved a 4.6 to 1 kill ratio while maintaining the lowest loss rate of any Allied fighter bomber. In March 1945, Joseph Priller, the same pilot who had called the P-47 meat for the slaughter 2 years earlier, gave an assessment deemed too demoralizing for German propaganda. "The Thunderbolt is the best fighter bomber ever built. Its firepower is unprecedented. They lose 10, they build 20. We lose 1, it's gone forever. We laughed at them in 1943. We're not laughing now." At a 1985 reunion in Arizona, former adversaries met in peace. General Adolf Galland, former head of the Luftwaffe fighter arm, was asked about the P-47. "We made a terrible mistake in 1943, he said. "We saw this big, heavy fighter and laughed. The Americans don't understand air combat, we said. We were the ones who didn't understand. They didn't try to build a European fighter, they built an American one, designed around production, firepower, and survivability. They understood that in a war of attrition, the plane that could take punishment and deliver devastating firepower would win." He paused. "Those guns, we called them Roosevelt's piano because of the sound they made. Once you heard that sound, you never forgot it. Many of my friends heard it for the last time. The P-47 didn't just defeat the Luftwaffe, it destroyed it." The P-47 Thunderbolt entered combat as an object of derision and ended the war as an instrument of annihilation. German pilots had laughed at an ungainly American fighter in April 1943. By May 1945, there were no German pilots left to laugh. The thunder had spoken, and the sky belonged to America. If you enjoyed this story, hit subscribe for more World War II historical deep dives every week. Thanks for watching.